All rise, please. Please be seated.
Hereby I open this academic ceremony in which Yuanyuan Zhu will defend the academic thesis driven to learn, understanding and supporting student autonomous motivation in health professions education. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you, dear Prorector, Corona members, supervisors, colleagues, families, and friends, and online viewers. In the next 15 minutes, I will present a summary of the work during my PhD, entitled Driven to Learn, Understanding and Supporting Students' Autonomous Motivation in Health Professions Education. To start with, I'd like to invite you to reflect on two moments. Well, first of all, think of a time when you worked really hard on something, not because you had to, but because you really wanted to. How did that feel? Now think of a time when you work on something only because you had to, or when you were told to. How did that feel? The difference of these two experiences is at the core of what we call autonomous motivation, the feeling of self-driven, feeling intrinsically wanted to act, and for students, that's coming driven to learn. However, for students in health professions education, research has shown that not all students are autonomously motivated. Many of them face challenges in sustaining their autonomous motivation in their learning environments and throughout their learning journeys. And this brings us the question of how to enhance autonomous motivation. We turn to self-determination theory, which proposes that if students' learning environment supports their three basic psychological needs, autonomy, readiness, and competence, students are more likely to feel autonomously motivated. Autonomy refers to a sense of being able to choose, having freedom, feeling that they can take initiative, take ownerships. And the relatedness concerns a feeling of connections with their peers, with teachers, with their learning subject matters. And the competence represents a feeling of being able to achieve different tasks, being capable, and the feeling of growing and learning. While self-determination theory has provided us a valuable framework to understanding students' autonomous motivation, we have also identified three gaps in the literature. First of all, there is a scarcity of research that examines comprehensively students' the associations between students' basic psychological needs, autonomous motivation, and well-being. And secondly, we have limited insights into how and why students' basic psychological needs or their environment's characteristics might support their autonomous motivation. And lastly, there are ample educational interventions that aim to stimulate students' autonomous motivation. Many of them have investigated how students' experiences related to motivation in these interventions. However, what remains unknown is how students' experiences within these interventions might also contribute to their motivation in their regular or ongoing studies. With these three gaps, we have developed our main research question: how can we understand and support students' basic psychological needs, autonomous motivation, and well-being within the learning environments in health professions education? To address the first gap, we have invited students from different programs, bachelor programs, in the field of health professions to fill out a survey measuring their basic psychological needs, autonomous motivation, and well-being. The model results show that there are positive associations between autonomy and autonomous motivation, relatedness and well-being, as well as between competence and well-being. These results indicate that all three basic psychological needs are important for students' autonomous motivation and well-being. Moving on to addressing the second gap of how and why learning environments might support or hinder students' autonomous motivation. We have collected data from students in 3 bachelor's programs and followed up with focus group discussions. The focus group discussions revealed 4 main themes of how and why these learning environments might impact students' autonomous motivation. First of all, students share that when having freedom, such as through being able to make choices, structuring their study schedules, they feel more freedom and autonomy and autonomous motivation. However, they also needed support along the way. The second theme was that when students engage in small group collaborations, they reported to be autonomously motivating. However, this also depends on the different group interactions between different groups. Students also share that the feeling of learning or acquiring knowledge help foster a sense of competence and autonomous motivation, while when assessments focus solely on testing details or facts, students are less autonomously motivated. Last thing we found is when students understanding the real-life relevance of their studies, they are more autonomously motivated. For example, when teachers share their fieldwork experiences or their career stories. To get more insights, we have developed, designed an educational intervention named Societal Impact Project, which aims to support students' 3 basic psychological needs. Students and teachers worked in small groups in this project to address societal challenges. To support a feeling of autonomy, we matched students' interests with the teachers and formulated groups. After the groups are formulated, students and teachers are able to define the societal challenges they'd like to work on, as well as able to pace their work. To foster a sense of relatedness, we made the groups relatively small, of 3 to 5 people in one group, and have organized community building events and activities. For a sense of competence, we have provided 4 workshops targeting creative problem-solving approach, which we aim to guide students in addressing different societal challenges. And students are also able to present their work during the project and at the end of the project, where they can ask for and receive feedback from each other. After students participate in this project, we have organized focus groups with students and teachers and identified 3 main themes, adding on the insights from the previous study. Well, first of all, students in societal impact projects also identified the importance of having freedom or choices, as well as the importance of support. When students have too much freedom with insufficient support, they might feel unmotivated. For example, when students said, "I like what we have space to do what we want to, but if we have trouble, it would be nice to have more guidance." The second theme that we can add on for the previous study is that students in the SID project, Societal Impact Projects, also recognize the importance of small group collaborations on their autonomous motivation. On top of that, they emphasize that when students are facing difficulties in the group, communicating openly really helps them to pick up their autonomous motivation in this sense. For example, They said, when students didn't feel motivated, we had a meeting, discuss about it, really communicate about. And after that, it went way better. The third theme we identified in Societal Impact Project is about societal problems. Students in this project also identify the very important role of real-life problems, and in this case, societal challenges or societal problems. However, students were saying the link between these societal problems are not always clear to them, which can be unmotivating. For example, when they said it's interesting, it's increased motivation, however, if their problems correlate more with their real-life studies, this could help improve their motivation. Moving on to the third gap of how educational interventions might impact students' motivation for their ongoing or regular curricula. We compared two groups of students. One group, intervention group, who has participated in societal impact projects, and one group as control group, who just followed their regular curricula. And we measured their basic psychological needs, autonomous motivation, in the beginning and the end of this period. Results have shown that the students who participated in societal impact project perceived their studies to be more enjoyable and valuable, suggesting a potential of such interventions. So looking at all the findings, what can we conclude? The first conclusion we have is all three basic psychological needs support autonomous motivation in a very collective way. They do not work separately, and they do support autonomous motivation. The second conclusion we have, when it comes to supporting autonomous motivation, it's not simply black and white. Instead, we need balance and attention to navigate the tensions between different learning environments. For example, when it comes to autonomous support, we need a balance without identifying too much, giving students too much autonomy and leaving them without support. When it comes to small group collaboration, we want to make sure also that students in different groups feel that their group are changing with different academics and monitor the dynamics along the learning journey. And thirdly, yes, providing optimal challenges might help students to feel autonomously motivated. However, we also need to make sure the assessments test students' learning in addressing these challenges instead of focusing solely on details or facts. And finally, we emphasize the important role of real-life problems, such as societal challenges. However, it's also important to clarify the link of these problems to students' ongoing studies to help foster a sense of autonomous motivation. The third conclusion we have is education interventions, such as societal impact projects, hold the potential to support students' autonomous motivation in a broader way for their ongoing curricula. And the specific characteristics of such interventions include offering students meaningful choices, engaging them in small group collaborations, as well as providing societal challenges for them to work on. The final message of my PhD work would be to transform students from feeling unmotivated to autonomously motivated. It's important to consider integrating basic psychological needs, supportive characteristics into our teaching and learning activities. Before I finish the summary of my PhD work, I'd like to invite you to imagine this again. In your own learning environment or in your work environment, you work on challenges that matter to you. You feel capable of overcoming difficulties, and you know you belong. And my question is, can we make this a norm for ourselves, our colleagues, and for students? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. The opposition will be opened by Professor Aude Ekbrink, Professor Implementation of Educational Innovations at this university. Professor Oudijkbrink was also the chairman of the assessment committee.
Thank you, Mr. Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you and your supervisors with your studies and your thesis. I read it with great interest. It is a timely and relevant topic, and it is nicely written, which makes reading it also a pleasure. Your thesis is about autonomous motivation and well-being of students in health professions education, and the way the learning environment can influence this by fulfilling the basic psychological needs, autonomy, relatedness, and competence, according to the self-determination theory. And you investigated this in a well-constructed series of 4 studies, using both quantitative and qualitative methods. And this is where my first questions are about. In chapter 2, you use quantitative data to investigate the association between these psychological needs and autonomous motivation and well-being of students in 3 different programs. This chapter shows a significant association between autonomous motivation and autonomy only, not with relatedness or competence. Your overall conclusion, however, as stated in the general discussion and also in your presentation just now, is that the basic psychological needs, all 3, autonomy, relatedness and competence, do all contribute to autonomous motivation. This conclusion is based on, especially on the qualitative data that you find in chapters 3 and 4. You mentioned the findings of chapter 2 to be an unexpected finding, since it does not fit the self-determination theory. So my first question is, can you explain these unexpected findings of chapter 2? Was the sampling group suited to answer the questions? Because program C was not really a health professions education program, and it offered more autonomy to students, as indicated in chapter 3. And this program was also, the number of students from this program was also quite a bit smaller than the numbers from the other 2 programs. So would you choose the same setup when you would be asked to repeat this study? What is your reflection on this? Do you have an explanation?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. Indeed, in chapter 2, we didn't find significant associations between relatedness with autonomous motivation, nor between competence with autonomous motivation, nor between autonomous motivation with well-being.
Yeah.
I think I can have 2 explanations. First of all, when we look at the scores of autonomous motivation in that study, we find students rated relatively high on a Likert scale of 1 to 7. So most scores are above 4. There are only 2 scores that are below 4. So in that sense, we suspect that the data points are relatively on the right side, so negatively skewed, and that could influence how or whether we can detect any associations between autonomous motivation with other variables. And the reason behind that could be that when students participating in the study, it was on a voluntary basis, so they could already want to contribute or understand the topic of motivation in their studies. That's our first explanation. And second of all, there might be hidden or undiscovered factors in this study. For example, there could be other mediators, especially given the context that data was collected during the pandemic. So we also suspect that the pandemic might have a role in this. When, for example, during that time, could be that all 3 needs are still important, but when it comes to well-being, it could be that students value more over relatedness and competence over autonomy. That's also one explanation that we have.
Would you choose the same setup with the same groups, or would you then go for example, only program A and B, or because that's more health professions education, or?
Yeah. I think I will stay with the same design because self-determination theory, self-determination has been tested to be quite universal for across different fields, disciplines, student groups. So I don't think the result that's in our study can represent or oppose other studies. Yeah.
Is it also a possibility that the data are true? That the self-determination theory does not match with the context that you studied this, so that it's not methodologically based, the fact that you don't find these relations or associations?
Sorry, is your question is if maybe self-determination doesn't fit in the context in my...
Yeah.
It's a good point to think about, but I would say that will require us to look into more on the specific characteristics, maybe for the student groups, or more in general, the group of health profession students when, for example, when they are in Maastricht University, when they work on problem-based learning, they could have more autonomy already. Yeah. But that's something we left uninvestigated.
Yeah. Can I ask a small question? Yeah. So your overall conclusion that these basic psychological needs all contribute to autonomous motivation are primarily based on qualitative data in chapters 3 and 4, which suggests that you trust qualitative data more than quantitative data. Can you reflect on this?
Thank you for your question. I wouldn't say it's just a question of which kind of methods I trust most, but I would say they would rather compensate each other. And through that, I try to have a bigger picture of how the associations are. I think maybe having only one of the methods could already weaken our conclusions. So I would say they are more of a relationship of compensating and offering insights to the quantitative results that we have.
Okay, we can talk about this further.
Yeah.
I give the word
Thank
back
you.
to the pro-rector. Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Koksma, Associate Professor Transformative Learning at the Radboud University. Dr. Koksma was member of the assessment committee, and we highly appreciate your participation to this academic ceremony.
Thank you, Mr. Pro-Rector, for giving me the opportunity to discuss the candidate's work. For a proper discussion, I would like to ask the tech support to also open the audio of the speakers in the room. Otherwise, it will be a very one-sided discussion. Before we start, I would like to join the previous speaker in congratulating you, the candidate, as well as your team, for your very interesting work and for your contribution to maybe one of the most important challenges of learning in healthcare and in general education, which is the development of autonomous motivation and a lifelong learning attitude. And I would like to start with a very general question, so you can zoom out a bit. And that is about the relevance of your research. That is the relevance for scientifically supporting the road toward a form of education with higher levels of autonomous motivation. And this is apparently a difficult road to travel. And hence my question, because there are literally hundreds or even thousands of scientific studies that show the relevance of fostering basic psychological needs for increasing learner motivation and for how to design learning environments for that purpose. And you, in your first 2 chapters, have once again contributed to corroborate such findings. And now the very basic question is, and maybe many in the audience also have it in the back of their minds already, It is this. Given this overwhelming scientific evidence, how is it possible that so many learning environments in medical education and in other domains still have troubles to foster autonomous motivation? And I know it's a big question, so to help you a bit, I will propose 3 possible answers. Answer 1 is educational management doesn't listen to science. Answer 2, there is something wrong with the science, or the science is missing something. And answer 3 is an alternative, perhaps more nuanced and complicated explanation. Which of the 3 options do you choose, and can you comment shortly on all 3 of them?
Sorry, can you repeat the 3 options? 3 options? No?
Do we have connection with Dr. Koksma?
Maybe I can go ahead with what the information I already got. Yeah, thank you. So the question that the impression of the question that I've received is there are already so many studies that look at learning environments and aimed at stimulating students' autonomous motivation, and why some of them are not succeeding, if not all. First of all, I would like to say this is a very complicated question, and I would say first of all it's quite context-based, and I would also identify what I think is very important in this case when developing learning environments to support students' autonomous motivation. To start with, I would say it's quite dependent on the context, and that will require us to first dive deeper into the realities our target group of students or health professions are working in, for example, using different methods to understand it, such as educational design-based research. So you start with an analysis of the needs and what really interests people in that ways. I think only based on that, then you can start to think about how to form your learning environments that are different but motivating for each specific context. But what I personally think very important is throughout my PhD work is to identify the interests of students, or as well as helping them realize that they are not doing their work in a separate world. So in that way, first I would say it's quite aligning a lot with what I talk about of autonomy and being able to provide activity that students are interested in working on. And that also aligns with the first part of the answer I give. And the second part of the question will be to provide a sense of relevance and help students to understand they're working in a environment, and help them to identify a bigger environment that they're working on, instead of just focusing on, for example, their study programs or their university work. So I would say, in that sense, connecting their studies with the general audience, people who are not in academia or in science, and help them with that connection, I would think it's also very important for designing learning environments.
Okay, thank you for your answer. To have a short in-between question, you talk about finding their interest. Is there maybe some kind of a sense of purpose that is maybe missing from the model of basic psychological needs? Would that be a contribution to the theoretical underpinnings of this line of research? And if so, do you consider it present enough in the SIP that you have been studying?
Yes, so if I correctly, so talking about interest from two aspects, first in terms of the theory and as well as its presence in the societal impact projects. So to start with, I would say the concept of aligning or providing students activities with interest aligns quite well with the need of autonomy, because autonomy starts with the idea of a sense of volition, and with that, it's not simply volition that has been forced upon students, but rather it's the volition that students should be able to identify themselves, and that, in my way, corresponds pretty well with the idea of interest, and so it's, a small conclusion is I don't think it's important, but I don't think there's an extra need to add another need as interest to the framework, but I would definitely say there's a lot of space to explore how interest in the conceptualizations of autonomy would support students' motivation and well-being. And the second part of the question is about the presence of interest in societal impact projects. I would say that's one of the priorities we looked at, or elements that we look at when designing this project. So we really start with a kickoff meeting where we ask the interests of students and teachers. So we collect their answers and then we match their interests together, or we try to do that. So students and teachers working in one group will share similar interests. That's how I would say a foundation where this project was started.
Okay. Thank you. Is there time for another question?
A short question, yes.
Short question. Okay, maybe then a methodological question or just something about the research setup. On page 80, you describe your data collection for this chapter 4 study on the SIP. And if I look at that, do I understand it correctly that you have only done focus groups after the SIP finished and not during the 8-month period? And I wonder what was the reason for that? Also because you also asked them to fill in a motivation graph, like on page 99, there's an example. And those graphs seem to be missing from the results, so I presume they fueled into the thematic analysis. And I was wondering if you can say something about the motivation to do it this way.
Yeah, so for the figure on page 99, we did interview, or we did conduct the focus groups at the end of the project. We did not really analyze or organize our analysis based on this figure only. Rather, the goal of this figure was more of like a conversation starter to get participants sharing about their experiences. That's why we did not really include it in the analysis of the methods parts. Yeah.
But can you say something about the dynamics of motivation during the project? Because, I mean, they can construct how that works. But
sorry, did you say dynamics of the moderation?
No, the dynamics of their motivation, of the students' motivation during different stages of the project. Because if you don't do observations or in between individual interviews with people, or then you solely base it on that single focus group. And maybe if they would have filled it in, they would have sort of have a better explicit idea about what happened to their motivation.
Short answer, please.
Yes, thank you. So here, the figure itself we use it more as a reflection exercise and a tool for the analysis. But generally speaking, students usually start their motivation with very high because they entered with great interests. But however, it really depends on the different phases and the group dynamics within different groups. So I would say it's quite difficult to generalize how their motivation might change during this in the projects. But yeah, a general trend I would say to start with high motivation.
Okay, thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
And I would like to give the word back to the pro-rector.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Wouters, Assistant Professor at the Amsterdam University Medical Center. Dr. Wouters was member of the assessment committee, and also for you, thank you for coming over for this ceremony.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I look forward to discussing your research, but first I would also like to congratulate you and your team on finishing this beautiful thesis. I think you've done a great job by including multiple perspectives. You've included students and teachers, and your studies demonstrate a variety of interesting approaches, ranging from the more fundamental to the theoretical to the more practical, so well done. But your work also prompted some thoughts and questions, and that's of course why we're here today. My first question, so in your thesis you have a strong focus on motivation, particularly viewed through the lens of SDT, self-determination theory, but I couldn't find an explanation of how you define well-being in your thesis. You've used the WHO-5 well-being index to measure subjective well-being. And you mentioned that this indicates, and you state on page 106 in chapter 5, people's overall evaluations of their lives and emotional experiences. And I see that the items are about feeling cheerful, relaxed, waking up refreshed, etc. But it still doesn't really give me an idea of what you consider to be the essence of well-being. So can you share your view on well-being and how you came to choosing this instrument for studying this in your thesis?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent, for the question. Indeed, well-being is a very important topic in the thesis, and we look at in mostly one of the chapters and have provided a definition of it. So to start with, I would say my view, and it is also a reality there when looking at the literature of about well-being or what can really represent well-being when choosing a survey or skill. There are quite a lot. So the main reason that we choose the WHO-5 well-being index was that it was designed and translated to different versions and has been applied across different cultures, and it was not the most comprehensive scale that measured well-being and did not really target students' well-being. But the reason that we selected, which also I would say supports my understanding of well-being, is that it reflects the overall positive emotions of a person, and and that's the main reason. And another reason we choose this was also for practical reasons, because in our survey we don't want to overwhelm students, and this survey, it's relatively short and has been proved validated. So in that concern, we also have made the decision to choose this skill.
Okay, thank you. What I hear from you and what I also read in the thesis, it pretty much focuses on the positive side of well-being, and it may not be very sensitive to really poor well-being or ill-being. And I've also gotten to know you as a very cheerful person, so it kind of makes sense that you choose to go this way, both for well-being but also the positive sides of motivation in your thesis. But theoretically, now I turn to motivation more, need frustration and also ill-being are also very relevant. And research also shows that need frustration and controlled motivation may put learners at risk for poor well-being and educational outcomes. And need frustration is still less studied in HPE and also in your thesis. Although in your qualitative work you do touch upon need frustration, but you have left need frustration and controlled motivation out of your quantitative analysis in chapters 2 and 3. Don't you think you miss out on important insights by including of excluding these dark sides of motivation and well-being?
Yeah, thank you for your question. First, I would very much agree that the frustration of basic psychological needs and controlled motivation or well-being are also quite important topics to understand, especially when it comes to understanding the dynamics of motivation. Yes, we did not really take this frustration, the needs frustration or well-being or controlled motivation in one or two studies, but in one of our studies, we did use variable relative autonomous motivation, which integrates both autonomous motivation and controlled motivation. And with this variable, it was supposed to provide a more nuanced or a bigger picture of the state of a person's motivation. So for that sense, we would say we still try, but and indeed in qualitative insights we did touch it, but I do agree that's a direction to go for future studies.
Yeah, I think that will be very interesting. I think my time's up, so I'll give the word back to the co-rector.
The opposition will be continued by Professor De Nooijer, Professor Interprofessional Teaching and Learning at this university. Professor De Nooijer was member of the assessment committee and she is the secretary of this degree committee.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, I would also like to first congratulate you and your team with this great achievement. It looks wonderful from the outside, but also the inside is very good. And I think it's good that innovations in education are informed by theory and research. But I'm also here to discuss your work. And perhaps you know that we are currently revising the Health Sciences Bachelor's program. And one of the biggest changes is that students are going to work on projects. So I was very happy to read your thesis about those social impact projects. And I would like to get some advice from you based on what you have done in your thesis work. We already discussed a lot about motivation, so I'll go to my second question, and that's about the duration of the project. It's 8 months. And I would like to know how you worked on the collaboration during those 8 months. Because what we normally see in teamwork among students is that they are very task-oriented. So they want to finish their task, they just finish before the deadline, and sometimes they have struggles with each other, but they just finish it, because projects normally take 8 weeks. But if you organize longer projects like these 8 months projects, you should also do something about the relation and the process in the collaboration. What do you think of that? How did you do that? And what would you recommend if we are going to implement longer term projects? How would you, what would be your advice for us?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. Yes, the project lasts for 8 months. To make an overall conclusion, I would say, yes, the project itself aims to provide students with autonomy and freedom, but also the concept of providing support or structure is also very important in this project, because as we have discussed before, when students have too much freedom without sufficient support, they may feel lost. So I think one practical insight that's come to my mind is we organize the whole project based on the 4 phases of creative problem-solving approach. And then we have instructors who come for different workshops to train students and teachers of how to implement each phase. And in the last round of this project, the instructors also provide some tasks that students can come back and report in next training session. But I would highlight a major difference of the way of providing tasks is that we try to provide the tasks in a autonomy supportive way. So it is support, but still it's not controlling, or it's still, the support is given with the aim to help students navigate their autonomy. a concrete example would be, for example, the instructors give them a task to design a prototype. However, students, they do not dictate what exactly you should define. However, their role are more likely to be support, helping and understanding students' idea, and then providing us some freedom to decide and the necessary support to that. So when students come back next session, they will have different prototypes that hopefully are achieved in a supportive way.
But if students collaborate for 8 months, somehow conflicts will arise. And my question is more on what do you do to overcome these conflicts? Do you also train them in conflict resolution skills or?
Yeah. Yes, conflicts did come in that way. And that was also one of the reflections that we had about the project. We did not provide them any training on, for example, conflict resolution, but we provided them a manual in the beginning about discussing their roles, discussing teamworks. Well, despite the manual, we would have already also identified different challenges they face when it comes to this. And so my personal reflection would be to add a session or group work that's also focused on team discussion. But I think no matter it's a workshop or training, it comes to one of the findings that we have identified is that having open communication about the conflicts or about the difficulties can really make a difference for their motivation.
Yeah, okay. I also have another question, and that's your projects are called social impact projects, but I don't see any social impact yet in your thesis. Yeah. If you could do a follow-up study, would you assess the impact on society, and what outcomes would you assess?
Thank you for the question. It's something that I think I'm also interested to do because, yes, we talk about societal impact of this project. However, we did not really look at the society parts of this project. And I think a very strong call that we've been feeling is about connecting different boundaries, sectors, disciplines, or transdisciplinary research. So I would say if I can do a follow-up study, I would also like to interview people or try to understand the experiences of stakeholders from the society, and based on that to improve the projects.
And when do you think then the impact of the project is a success, or what would you ask the stakeholders?
I think it also depends on the goals that we set up at the beginning. If for students, maybe it's more about their learning, growth, competences. But if we define it to be more oriented with a practical real-world problem from society, then maybe we'll have to look at that from that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Langui, assistant professor at this university.
Thank you. Dear candidates, it was nice to read the thesis that you wrote, especially on the SIP projects, the social impact projects, because I was involved myself, and you did a great organization of those SIP projects there. So congratulations with the thesis and that organization. And of course, I'm going to ask questions about chapter 4 and 5. The first question I want to ask is, in chapter 4, you say that you have these SIP projects, but still students were missing the link between the social relevance of the projects and the link with the curricula. So every time as coaches, we were asked which topics we suggest. Is there another way now that you think we should approach this to make the students feel it's more connected to the curricula?
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. One of the discussions or reflection we had is, would there be a difference if this project, SIP, was part of the curriculum? So if we start with a a problem that already related to their ongoing curricula, maybe that can help prevent this disconnect from the very beginning. But one concern I would say is also that kind of limits freedom of how far their topics can go. So I would say the key is more about finding a balance that, or identify students' interest in where they are and what really helps them feel motivated. So yeah, it's definitely not one fits all approach, but also going all the way to be related to curriculum can also pose some challenges. So I would say it's somewhere in between. But, yeah, but it's something I think still need to be thought about.
Mm-hmm. But do you then say, should we look at the topics of the courses and find societal problems? Or do you see it different? Because every course has its own topic in the first year.
Yes, I think that could be, yeah, that could be one way to go. But again, I think I would emphasize it might feel different when these problems come from the structure of the institution or the curricula itself, compared when students should be able to identify them themselves. So I think that is one possible way to go, but it needs extra caution when doing this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my next question is regarding your proposition 4. Maybe one of your paranyms can read out proposition 4.
I should have brought my glasses. Educational interventions that provide choices, adaptive support, small group collaboration, and societal relevant problems may contribute to students' increased perceived value of their regular curricula. This thesis.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if the proposition is really totally true, because you say the interventions made them feel that the intervention group was more happy with the rest of their curricular and more engaged rather than the control group. But I wonder if there's a selection bias here in your control group and your intervention group. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's very difficult to say if there is a selection bias or not, but because I would say the general impression we have when students volunteer to participate in any kind of study, there's kind of motivation. But what we did in this study is we kind of compared their backgrounds, other factors related to their backgrounds, beforewards. So when we recognized that there was not any significant difference on that, then we proceeded to draw this conclusion. And it's also very difficult to say this is a causal conclusion, but because we can't just based on this quantitative results, that's why we say they may contribute, or they have the potential to change students' perceptions to their ongoing curricula.
Just quickly, as I may. Would it be an idea within the SIP, because there were 2 years that you followed them up, would it be an idea in these 2 years that you would check again with the students that continued, because some students even continued after the 8 months? Do you think that would be of value, to question them compared to the ones that stopped?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean to compare their motivation after long? Yeah. I think it's certainly adds value to it, but also it's important to think about what kind of questions we're asking and how practical it is. So I would say yes, but yeah, I would say yes, it adds value, but just need to probably think of how this data longitudinal, I think, adds perspective, but in what ways can we formulate it better to achieve the question? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Give the word back.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Waterval, assistant professor at this university.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I concur with all the compliments that have been made before and also to your team. Your work is very relevant, and I can only testify that. In particularly, the loss of motivation, and particularly loss of motivation, is a frequent topic in our work as student advisor. And after reading your work, I wish that more students would come to our office saying that, can you help me, please, my basic psychological needs are being wrecked. That would give a whole different perspective and framework. I prepared a couple of questions, but since you are a motivated learner, an autonomous learner, I want to give you the choice which question you would like to start with. You can choose between a question which is about Chapter 5 and the methodological approach you've taken and the interpretation of the results, or a question which is about the implementation of your insights in your past experience.
Based on my past experience?
Yes.
I will go with implementation.
Implementation. Okay.
I feel very motivated now.
You're motivated, I think. I hope. You write in your introduction that not only you have a history in medical education, but also in accountancy and tourism. And you use these examples to show that how motivation impacted and influenced your overall motivation. It thrived in one, and you actually said, I hated the other ones. Now let us dream, and you are asked now to become the program director of that particular accountancy program. And using all the things that you've learned about self-determination theory. My first question, if you would have unlimited resources and you may dream, what would you do? Second question, but if you don't have unlimited resources, what small changes can be made if you were the program director?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, highly esteemed opponent. The first part is not a difficult question because I know what I hate about that project. So I would say the way, I would say it specifically targets on the feeling of relatedness. Because for that project, we went to that class. It was in a big classroom with one lecturer talking for 2 hours straight with one break in between. And everyone was taking notes, trying to understand. There was not much interaction between the students, nor between students and the teachers. So if I had all the resources, I would probably start a reform of the university and helping them to understand the roles of other teaching or learning approaches, and hopefully to change the environment where strictly lectures were given. I would also change how this project was implemented in the way of organization. Because when I was there, it was mostly just exams. We did not have the opportunity to practice accounting or doing internship or being able to talk to people from that field. So it was strictly textbooks. What I would change is to connect students, teachers with organizations or people who are actually accountants together to learn and work in small groups. And when I don't have unlimited resources, I would at least try to provide a workshop for teachers to understand the different options while it comes to teaching.
Okay, and if this was all implemented, would you then have chosen or stayed with accountancy?
Sorry?
And if all of these dreams were implemented, would you then have chosen to stay in accountancy? Would that?
Thank you for your question. It's a very interesting question, which also makes it a bit complex based on my own personal characteristics. I think I would, if I were at that age, at that environment, I probably would, because this sounds more interesting. I could feel the different stimuli in the environment. But looking back now, I probably would say no, because I have a better feeling of what I'm interested in. So autonomy is also important.
So you're saying, okay, so it's not, there are also other factors that determine my motivation. It's not only that the learning environment.
There are interpersonal factors. Sorry.
You may shortly finish your answer.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yuan Zhu, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. I know what's on the line. I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose that branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. The mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. Even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Long road to the south side, 7 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and that. Years can't fly by. by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Please be seated.
Yuanyuan Zhu, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense in view of its positive verdict and taken into account your previous qualifications. The degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Savelberg is authorized to confirm upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
All rise, please.
Dear candidates, do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority invested in us by law and in conformity with decisions of the committee here present, I hereby confirm upon you, Yuanyuan Zhu, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university. And I'm going to try not to break my tongue. Zhu Boshi, Hen Gao Qing, Zhu He Ni, Huoda Boshi, Zhu Wei. Gongxi. I hope this sounded a bit like Dr. Zhu. It's a pleasure for me to congratulate you on this doctoral degree. Very well done. We are very proud of it. And Diana will now give the laudation. Maybe not in Chinese or?
No. Dear Dr. Zhu, I will continue in English. Dear Yuanyuan, congratulations with this big and special achievement of obtaining your PhD degree. I will address you on behalf of the team of supervisors, Hans, Leo and Rashmi. Your PhD journey started in December 2019. Hans received an email from you. You applied for a PhD project that was not related to education, but on a biology topic. Nevertheless, your letter attracted our attention. And you wrote this: though I'm not a biology student, I have done research to examine the influence of affective factors on students' academic performance and have rich experience in education. I've been teaching English to students of different ages for over 3 years. But now, the most interesting part of this email comes. So the reason is, the most important reason I would love to work with you is, I want to learn things that I know are meaningful, beneficial for others. In this sense, the project becomes my top choice. So not only when you started to prepare today's presentation, in which we had to think about what motivates us and what demotivates us, also when you applied for the PhD position, you were driven by a motivation issue. And although your background did not match with the biological-oriented project Hans initially proposed, you made us think that you would and could be a flexible and motivated to learn new domains and succeed. And today, we have been proven right. We talked to you via Zoom and you wrote a great project proposal, which was related to an educational project, the social impact project of Hans Comenius' proposal. You built on this project and wrote a very nice and great proposal. You received a grant from the China Scholarship Council and moved from China to Maastricht. You arrived in Maastricht October 2020. And this was the start of a very remarkable PhD journey. The ultimate aim of your PhD project was to learn, for instance, for biomedical students, to see how their studies, their knowledge and their skills can be relevant in better understanding and solving challenges around health. You designed an educational program that was meaningful and impactful for students and teachers. You designed it, you implemented it, you coached and motivated many first-year students to participate. You participated in the trainings of the teachers or the so-called coaches, organized social drinks, social activities for the students, etc. You made really a meaningful and impactful contribution for educational practice and research. And we learned more about how to motivate students. But beyond your PhD project, you also made a lot of impactful contributions to other educational programs. You were a teacher in many courses and obtained your university teaching qualification, or BKO. You also became the SHE PhD coordinator. And it's good to see that so many of your colleagues and PhD candidates of SHE are here today. You became a member of the SHE management team. In other words, you soon became a true member of our community, who made many relevant contributions to many different activities within the department and the SHE research group. You also learned Dutch, and very, very quickly. You sent us emails in Dutch already, I think, after 1 year staying here. You loved cooking for colleagues, for friends, for teachers, for your supervisors. You worked in a restaurant, and you enjoyed your stay in Maastricht. And one person, Flavians Lux, became a good friend who made you feel really welcome in Maastricht. And that's something that I should mention today. You visited Rashmi in Amsterdam and worked with her. Together with Rashmi, you went to the Self-Determination Conference in Orlando, and where Rashmi told us that she discovered that she is a fabulous dancer. So, something that we didn't know, Hans. You also visited a summer school in Rotterdam on education for social change. And in this summer school, you learned how we can help students to understand their place in this rapidly changing world with social inequality, climate change problems. And this course really triggered your mind. I still remember when you came to my office after this course and said, Diana, I was really thinking all these days, should I travel that much given the global warming of the world? But you decided, and I think that's very right, that traveling in combination with taking care of others is even better. Traveling is what you like. And many times when we met online, you were somewhere in the world traveling and working. You will soon travel to Kenya. You were granted approval for a funding from the Children's Rights Research Fund and will work there for 2 weeks on a project about children's rights. You plan to work with the children as co-researchers and are planning to collect data as well during these 2 weeks. So this also demonstrates your, interest in other people. The PhD trajectory was not always easy. You can imagine when you have 4 different supervisors. But anyway, you managed to take the lead in the project yourself. You were very autonomously motivated and would well be able to make choices and defend what to choose and what to do. We also several times discussed your next steps in your career. And you always said, I want to do something meaningful and impactful to others. And we were wondering, but what is it? A few months ago, you visited your parents and friends in China, came back for the final last pieces of your PhD. And thereafter, you decided that you wanted to stay a little longer in the Netherlands. You searched for a new project and applied for a postdoc position. And we are very happy that you decided to stay with our group to work with us on a project for another 3 years, in which we will focus on the societal impact, much more, hopefully. You made many friends within our community. They are here today, and I think it's great that we together can celebrate this big achievement. So congratulations, also for your parents and your sister. They are joining this ceremony online from a long distance, but they can all be very, very proud. Being meaningful and impactful for others was your message at the start of this project. You succeeded very well in being there for others. Thank you so much. We wish you all good luck with the next steps of your career and in your life. It's time, I think, to celebrate this big achievement.
Dear Dr. Zhu, it's also a pleasure for me to congratulate you on behalf of the Maastricht University and the Board of Deans with this new distinction. You have a continuous future in research, as just mentioned by one of your supervisors as postdoc, and we wish you all the best in your future. And I believe driven to learn can be will be an important aspect, in fact, for the way you also defended your thesis. Hereby, I will close this academic ceremony. I will ask the audience already to move to the reception room, and in the meantime, we will make a picture with a new doctor in front of the screen, and then a next picture on the stairs in the central hall. Hereby, I close this academic ceremony.
Congratulations.